Good afternoon. So this parable of the rich man and Lazarus, it's a great illustration of someone who is stuck at level 1 and level 2 happiness. If that doesn't sound familiar, last Saturday we had this wonderful turnout for the 4 levels of happiness. Parish Center was filled with folks taking a deep dive at this question of what makes us happy. And for those who couldn't make it, just a quick summary, because it helps us understand this parable, this gospel today of the rich man and Lazarus. So our happiness is connected to our desires. And so when those desires are rightly ordered and those desires are fulfilled, we experience happiness. And there are different levels of happiness, depending on what kind of desires are satisfied. So level 1 is the happiness that comes with the pleasure of physical senses, of the physical senses. Does anyone remember what I like to call this level 1 happiness? Yes, ice cream happiness. And I think Father Spitzer calls it, I lunge at the bowl of linguine happiness, right? And so it makes us happy because we have this immediate gratification and pleasure with that trip to the parlor across the Hunt Club. But level 1 happiness is very fleeting. And, we may be pretty content after that trip to the parlor, but then just a few hours later, we're hungry again. Maybe we're even hangry at times, right? Now, level 2 happiness is the happiness that comes with personal achievement and fulfillment of ego needs. If you recall, I like to call this one Tiger Woods happiness because it deals with personal achievement and ego and self-esteem needs being fulfilled. Now, level 3 is the happiness that comes with doing good beyond your own self and acting for the greater common good, the betterment of others, the betterment of society. And then level 4 happiness, the highest level, comes from being in relationship and in union with ultimate goodness, ultimate truth, ultimate love, ultimate beauty. All those transcendentals that are found fully in God alone. Right? He who is ipsum esse subsistens, the very act of being itself. As St. Augustine had mentioned, our hearts are restless. They're just restless until they rest in thee, O Lord. So these are the 4 levels of happiness, and each of those 4 are good for us. Right? We were made to experience all 4 levels of happiness. They make a healthy human being when they are properly ordered in our lives. But when disordered and unbalanced, they can become very unhealthy and even lead to our very downfall, as it did with the rich man. So that's why it's so important to realize this dynamic that I'm about to share with you. That over time, one of these levels of happiness becomes dominant and becomes the meaning and purpose of our life. So it's crucial then that we are continually aware of which one of these drives for happiness is most dominant in us. That ends up being our God. So that's why there may be false gods in our life. Maybe we will have to repent of violating the first commandment. There may be false gods in our life if our dominant force is anything but level 4. Right? That will become, whatever that is, will become the meaning and purpose of your life. So are you aware of which level of happiness most drives you in your life? So that brings us back to the rich man. Jesus, in starting the parable, describes this rich man's life. He said, quote, "There was a rich man who was dressed in purple garments." Remember that in ancient times, the purple dye was very hard to come by and so very expensive. So purple clothes were often a sign of wealth. So he wore purple garments and fine linen and dined sumptuously each day. Now, especially for those ancient times when intermittent fasting wasn't a health fad, but simply the daily norm for the hoi polloi, right? Just a solid meal a day. So to dine sumptuously each day was living a life of gluttony. Now, being Catholics, we all like to fast, or we all like to feast, I should say. And we feast to mark special occasions and feast days, but to feast every single day would be disordered and no longer makes special days special, all right? So Jesus is painting a picture of this guy who's obsessed with level 1 and level 2 happiness, dining sumptuously each day, level 1, wearing purple garments, look at me, I'm somebody, I'm rich, I've arrived, level 2, right? So being stuck at these two base levels results in self-absorption, narcissism, and addiction. He thinks that more happiness simply means getting more of level 1 and 2. And it blinds him to his neighbor and the people around him, right? It blinds him to Lazarus's needs. Notice Jesus doesn't say he's transgressed mortally against any of the 10 commandments. He doesn't say, it seems like this rich man hasn't killed anybody. He hasn't committed adultery or abused his children. He hasn't lied or deceived anyone except, of course, himself. So what eternally separated him from God and his neighbor Lazarus was his mere complacency and being obsessed with pleasure and comfort and his own ego, which then blinded him from the highest levels of happiness, that of love of God and love of neighbor, missing out then on the very purpose and meaning of life itself. Right, so we have to avoid getting stuck in level 1 and 2. We all need a healthy dose of that, but getting stuck of that is very unhealthy. In our social media world, these base levels can all too easily become the dominant drives for happiness in our society, that our society lifts up. And it's resulting in disastrous consequences. This turn inward upon ourselves has turned our gaze away from one another and have made us blind to each other's needs. So that results in broken relationships, broken families, broken communities, and thus a broken society. We've forgotten about love of neighbor, which corresponds to level 3 happiness, and love of God, which corresponds to level 4 happiness. That's what's going on in the world. And so, before it's too late, we have to foster within ourselves a longing for level 3 and level 4 happiness, and to strive to integrate such activities in our daily life, in which we strive for the greater common good of our families, our community, and our society, to truly be free in our person. So as to do this, right? These are the things that truly make us free. When we pursue righteousness, devotion, faith, love, patience, and gentleness. When we compete well for the faith. And that's actually then a good transition from the homily to this week's diocesan update on a pressing issue that warrants all of us to go beyond level 1 and 2 and really invest in level 3 happiness that works for the greater common good of our society. And that is, of course, to fight like heaven for the defeat of Proposal 3. So for those who haven't heard, Proposal 3 is an amendment that would insert 323 words into our Michigan state constitution and would make us the most radical state in the nation. Even worse, yes, than California and New York. That's what I'm saying, nope. It was crafted by a coalition led by Planned Parenthood and the ACLU, and our governor has pledged to fight like hell to pass it. And we are, of course, going to fight like heaven to defeat it. The pro-abortion lobby and radical left, however, are doing a phenomenal job of having people believe this ballot measure is merely about giving people reproductive freedom, right? First of all, that freedom was never taken away from us. No one is outlawing anyone from having relations with any other consenting adult, right? That's what reproductive freedom is. What the opposition is trying to include in that notion, however, is being able to snuff out the consequences of abusing that reproductive freedom, even if it means snuffing out the life of an innocent human being. As Lila Rose said, whether you live 10 minutes, 10 years, or 100 years, you're a human and have a right not to be killed. But for proposal 3 to be actually defeated, we have to go beyond the morality question of abortion, because that's a debate that won't be resolved in the next 7 weeks, and that's all the time we have between now and November 8th, right? For folks who would favor the legality of abortion, we have to appeal to the fact that this proposal goes well beyond simply the issue of abortion. Even though the amendment is 323 words, you'll only see a 95-word summary on the ballot. So you have to go out of your way to read the whole amendment. Moreover, the language is intentionally obscure and unclear so that people don't realize all the consequences that can result from the passage of the proposal. The proposal very much threatens parental rights, particularly their right to be informed about their child contemplating not only abortion, but also very dangerous procedures that would alter or mutilate the bodies of their very own children, which radical school teachers might encourage them to consider in the name of self-discovery, right? It's already happened. And it's coming to our state if this isn't defeated. This is the very thing that so many parents have fought with school boards throughout the country to prevent, right? Yet it's being slipped in this proposal like pork, slipped in. So parents who don't look into this proposal very carefully could unknowingly be voting for the conditions that would entail the very surrender of their own parental rights to know about, much less consent to, dangerous procedures on their children, and any radical authority figures pushing such options at school and helping children procure them. This proposal very much threatens the safety of women who would contemplate abortion because it would, quote, invalidate the laws that conflict with this amendment. So that would, for example, endanger the state law that abortion clinics need to be licensed and inspected to ensure the safety of the women that enter into it. The vague language and the rescinding of current laws would also lend the proposal to protecting any abortionist who harms or even kills a woman during an abortion. And it also endangers the law that only physicians do abortions. In sum, this proposal radically goes far beyond what Roe versus Wade permitted. It's not only extremely dangerous for women and children in particular, but also for the freedom of parents to protect their children from irreparable harm. So to circle back to the 4 levels of happiness, it's good to know another dynamic entailed in achieving supreme happiness, which is this: we often have to sacrifice some of the lower levels of happiness in order to achieve the higher levels of happiness. Think of athletes as they strive for personal achievement. They have to discipline their bodies and sacrifice some level 1 ice cream happiness in order for them to achieve peak performance. All right? So it's the same if we want to attain the higher levels of 3 and 4 and make this world a better place and reach heaven and take as many people as we can with us. We too can be too obsessed or bloated with level 1 and 2 happiness, and so there's a need to sacrifice some of that. While the gratification from levels 3 and 4 is not as immediate, the higher levels of happiness are much more profound, long-term, and perduring. It's what truly satisfies, not Snickers, right? So in order to defeat proposal 3, that's why the bishop has called us those 3 ways that help us to go higher, right? Prayer, sacrifice, and action. How do we work those in right away? Well, here's a suggested game plan. Thursday this week begins the 40-day period to the eve of Election Day. As we know from Lent, 40 days are a traditional period of time for prayer, sacrifice, and action. Jesus prayed and fasted for 40 days before his public ministry. The city of Nineveh prayed and fasted for 40 days to save the city from destruction. And so let us, in these 40 days before Election Day, starting Thursday, from this Thursday, October 29th to Monday, November 7th, answer the bishop's call to fight like heaven with those three weapons of the spiritual life: prayer, sacrifice, action. With regards to prayer, take up the bishop's challenge to pray a rosary each day. If you find yourself at 9 p.m. not having prayed your rosary, you can join Father Brian and me on our parish Facebook page, where you can pray the rosary with us and over 100 other households. With regards to prayer or fasting, perhaps try out that intermittent fasting thing, when you only eat during a 6 to 8 hour period each day. That's what I'll be doing, along with abstaining from alcohol for those 40 days. Then for the giving or the action aspect, you can dedicate some of that extra time you have from not having to prepare a meal, and dedicate it to contacting, emailing, calling folks to inform them of the extreme dangers of this proposal to women, to children, to families, and to our society. So that 40-day period of prayer and fasting would begin this Thursday. If you'd like 3 cheat days for your fasting because of some wedding or a couple of special occasions coming up, then begin your intermittent fasting tomorrow instead of Thursday. So that way you still have all 40 days. So I just offer that as what I'll be doing as just a suggestion in case you're wondering how you can concretely join the effort and to fight like heaven.